We're going to go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about soil today. And I only have a few slides, like 10, and like 4 of those are questions. So there's not a ton of like deep information I want to give you guys, but I do want to just kind of talk a little bit about soil. So let's get started with the very beginning. Okay, so you guys may have seen this picture in your content, or if you haven't, you will soon. This picture is like classic apes, um, and it's called a soil horizon, and it looks like a piece of like soil cake, um, kind of. And the soil horizon, the soil is like broken down into these different layers, and these different layers mean different things. And sometimes the FRQ on your test will ask you like what's in the O horizon, what's in the B horizon. It'll ask you some things like that, and you may have questions like that on your quiz, and you may need it for your lab. So it just kind of depends on, especially the quiz and the test, what question you get. But so the O horizon is the very top. Okay, so that's right here. Ooh, that line is really thin. I don't like it that thin. That's a little better. So the O horizon is the very top, and it's interesting. Even though it's the very top, it's not actually the topsoil. I know that's confusing. Sometimes in science we can't make things easy; we have to make them difficult. And this layer it has. Let's see if I can write it on here. Yeah. So this layer has what they call humus or humus. And this hummus is basically like, if you've ever like kind of gone on a walk in the woods, my kids like to do this a lot. They like to go outside and you can see that there's this like leaf litter, it's like broken up leaves and kind of, bits of twigs and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like dirt, but it's not really dirt. It's like just broken up leaves and stuff. And if you pick it up kind of on the bottom, it's really dark. It's usually a lot of times like kind of wet. Um, that is the hummus, and that's that surface it's okay. It's okay. Um, that hummus is that surface litter and that decomposing plant matter. And this is the part that is so important for plant growth. Because it's where all the nutrients are, and that's where the decomposing is happening, and all those nutrients are getting returned to the soil. So this layer, it's interesting. You know, as an like a AP environmental person, we like to talk about soil, but then we also like to talk about dirt, right? And a lot of times, at least in apes, we consider soil to be biotic, which is living because it has that humus layer, and that humus layer is all that stuff that used to be living, that's decomposing. And then when you think about dirt, just like I've got dirt in my yard, typically we think of that as like abiotic because that's, like weathered rock and stuff like that. But this whole profile is soil. And so a lot of times in apes, we'll consider soil to be biotic because, it does have this living layer. And so this top layer is super important and nutritious for plant growth. And a big problem is like, let's say we got rid of all of this grass, then all we'd have on the top was humus. And erosion is going to sweep away that humus first. Okay. And so if you've got a lot of erosion on your land, you're automatically losing that O layer where all that important stuff is that plants need to grow. And so, unfortunately, that really important part is the first thing that gets taken away, and then the plants can't grow as well. It would have been handy if, things decompose maybe like, here, if that was the decomposing layer. It's not super realistic, right? Um, because there's no way you could kind of skip the A layer and have it down there. But that's the first thing that gets taken away. So that's unfortunate. Um, Now the A horizon, this is the next one. Interestingly, the A horizon is known as topsoil. So, the very top layer is not topsoil, The second layer is topsoil, and that's because, that first layer is all that leaf and stuff like that. It's not really, I mean, we call it soil, but it's not like dirt. If you're gonna buy topsoil at like Home Depot or something, you're gonna buy like an A horizon. It's not, a lot of times it's not gonna have like all the humus and the broken up leaves and all that stuff. In fact, a lot of times people don't want that stuff in their topsoil when they buy it. And this is basically like a mix of like humus and leached minerals. The topsoil is also very important, but it's not nearly as important as the humus. Um, but both of these are kind of like a biological layer because the A is like a mix. It's a mix of the humus, and then a mix of this parent material at the bottom. And then now, this graphic doesn't have it, um, but it's the best graphic I could find. There's another layer right here, and that's called the E horizon. And the E horizon um, stands for this word called alluviation. Okay. And that's like the process of leaching that occurs as water moves, like trickles down, in the soil. Minerals and things leach down in the soil. And so alluviation is that process. And so that's kind of what happening here is some of these, biological materials in these top two layers are kind of leaching down. A lot of those nutrients and minerals and things are kind of leaching down into the bottom. And so that's a little thin layer, and they call it the E horizon. Okay. The next horizon is the B horizon, and we call this the subsoil. Let me get you a different color since I guess started that thing. Um, and this is called the subsoil. It'd be nice if it was called like the S horizon because it was the subsoil, and like the humus horizon was the H, like it made sense, but it does not. Um, and this is mostly is like leached minerals from the A and the E horizon. So it's going to have a lot of iron and like aluminum oxides. Um, and so a lot of times this layer is also high in clay. And so, if it's got a lot of iron and it's got a lot of clay, it's going to be this reddish brown color, almost this color I picked for the um, this color that I picked for it, which I didn't actually do that on purpose. Um, Now let's get another color. Let's try, maybe if I can find a blue or something. Okay. Now the very bottom is the C horizon, and this is your parent material, which is like rock. Okay. And as we go down, the pieces of the little particle pieces are getting larger. So you can see like, we have these, there's some actual like rocks in here where, the pieces are really small. And then on these very top two layers, they're really, really dark and we can't really see, it's very tiny. Um, so again, the O horizon is that like broken up leaf stuff that you see, like, if you go walking in the woods, or something like that, you go hiking, you might see that on the trails. The topsoil is that dirt part. Like if you're gonna buy dirt at Home Depot, that black dirt, that you need for planting your plants, that's like the topsoil. The alluviation is really thin, and that's that leaching layer that's leaching some of those things from the O and the A down through to the B. The B horizon is going to be red and brown. It's going to have a lot of minerals in it, metals, mostly iron and aluminum, and it's going to be that red brown. And then the parent material is going to be these like, it's going to have like big rock pieces. Um, and so, again, unfortunately, these top two layers are the most important. And that's the first stuff that you lose when there's erosion. And we'll talk about this in a minute towards the end when we talk about the different areas of the planet and what types of soil they have and the problems that can cause, when we like say get rid of a rainforest or something. Okay, so let's go on. Now, here's our soil particles, and this one's kind of hard to see. Let me make it, but like this right here, that's the clay, that little red dot. Okay, so like coarse sand is this big circle, and then silt is that little tinier circle, and then clay is like that dot. That's the size of each of those relative to each other. Okay, so there's some important things we need to know when we're talking about these sizes, one, if you think of like, if you have like, a kiddie pool, right? And you fill a kiddie pool with like like those ball pit balls, those really big balls, that kids use for like ball pits. You know what I'm talking about? Um, like before COVID, like kids would play in there and think nothing of it, like how germy it was. If you were to fill like a kiddie pool with those, that would be like filling it with sand. And you could pour lots of water in there, and it'd be easy for the water to float down to the bottom. You could pour M&Ms in there, you could put whatever you want in there, and it would easily float down to the bottom because there's lots of spaces between all of those balls because they're so big, right? Um, that's kind of what the sand is like. So if you have very sandy soil, the water just kind of like goes through really, really quick. It just percolates through really, really quick. And so like when I grew up, I lived in Florida, and we rarely ever had, almost hardly ever, standing water, in the sandy areas because it just went through so quickly. And you can think like the beach, right? It makes a lot of sense. Not that like people planned the beach, but it makes a lot of sense to have those huge particles, at a beach because it allows it to dry really quickly and excuse me, the water and the things to move through that. So then we'll talk about silt. That would be like maybe putting a marble, right? Filling a kiddie pool with marbles. You could pour water through it and water would probably percolate okay. If you would pour M&Ms over those marbles, you might not get that many M&Ms, falling to the bottom. Maybe some if you were to like mess around with the marbles, but the M&Ms would probably kind of stay towards the top because there's not a lot of space between those marbles. And so it's going to hold a lot more water or things like that. So you can think silt's kind of the same way. The particles are really small, not as small as clay, but they're pretty small. And so if you have very silty soil, your water will percolate through, but it's going to be a lot slower than with sand. Okay. And then clay's your very smallest. So this would be like if you were to take like teeny tiny little beads, like those beads that are in like necklaces, small little beads, and you were to fill the kiddie pool with beads, right? Um, you could pour water through that and water would probably, it would still soak through, right? It would take even longer. Um, your M&Ms would probably never make it to the bottom, right? You could probably put, I could put one of my kids like Tonka trucks or something on top of those beads and it wouldn't sink to the bottom. So again, you've got that even smaller particle, and so you're going to have it's the water's not going to get through it very well. So if you can think like a lot of us in Georgia, right, we have clay soil, and I know we've had, at least at our house, we've had a lot of rain recently, and there's some places where it's still really, really wet, and sometimes the water tries is we call standing water. It doesn't soak all the way through and it takes a couple days to go through, or we walk through the yard and it's like mush, 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 mush because it's still so wet because it takes a long time for that water to soak through the clay. Okay. So that's our three sizes of our soil particles and how those three sizes kind of determine, what the at least water holding capacity and even some of the nutrient holding capacity of that soil is. Okay. Um, Let's go to the next one. Okay, so now let's talk about soil texture triangles. And Omkar, in a second, I'm going to get you logged into Whiteboard Um, but first, I'm going to talk about these soil texture triangles. So this is a soil texture triangle, and they're really used, like real life science, soil science people use these to kind of determine the type of soil that you have. And so you guys do have a soil lab, and you'll take soil from your yard, and you'll do a couple different things with it to kind of determine the breakdown of your soil and what kind of soil it is. And you'll get the percentages of soil by doing kind of like a settling test. And so what you'll do is you'll put all your soil in like a jar or something. And the best kind of a jar um, is one with like really straight edges, if you have a jar like this, it's not gonna work as well. It really helps to have kind of these right angle edges if you have that kind, or like a cup or something like that. And you're gonna put your soil in there, and you'll put a certain amount of water. It tells you exactly what to do in there, and then you'll just kind of wait. And after 30 minutes, a little bit will settle, and that will be your sand, because the sand settles the quickest because it's the heaviest, right? Because it's the largest, right? And then you'll wait. I think it's an hour, but don't quote me on it. You'll wait a little longer, and you'll have a little more that settles. And that little more that settles, that'll be your clay. Okay. And then in some solutions, you can wait long enough and the silt will settle. I mean, sorry, this will be the silt and this will be sand. I know this is hard to read. I'm sorry. And this will be the clay. Okay, so the clay is the last one to settle. And in some cases, the clay never settles because it's so, so tiny. Okay, but if you know that you have, you know, 15 mils of soil, and you know that 5 of it is sand and 5 of it is silt because you got those 2 to settle out, then you can kind of, do 15 minus 5 minus 5 and get 5 for your clay. So you can kind of like work backwards that way. And sometimes you don't have to wait as long to get the clay to settle out. And like I said, some people's clay never settles out, which is why this having that right angle on your container is a little easier, because you might get a little bit of error, if you've got a little angle here, because you might not have the right amount. Um, you can also, if you don't know the mils of your jar, you can also kind of measure in height. So you could do, centimeters or something, of your soil sample. So there's a lot of ways to do it in case you don't have exactly what the lab is asking you for. If you don't have exactly what it asked you for, just email me and I can kind of help you. But definitely look at that early, because that's one of those labs that takes a little bit of time, and it takes some time for that to settle. So, just because you're waiting, you have to start it like 2 days ahead of time or 3 days ahead of time, and so you have time to write your lab report. Um, it doesn't actually mean you're going to spend lots of time, like, waiting for it to settle. You're not really doing a lot with it that time. You're just kind of waiting. Um, so that's just a little aside about your lab. Now, let's get back to the stool texture triangle. So, let's say, for example, like this was your sample, and so you had 25%, 25%, um, and well, that's not gonna work, right? So I'll do 50. Um, and that would be, we'll do sand, silt, SASI, and clay. Okay. So how would we do that? So if we have 25% sand, you see how these numbers are kind of angled right here? So we're going to use the angled line, and I'm going to be right here. Do you see that? It's halfway between 20 and 30, and it's angled. Do you see that? And I'm just going to like kind of make a little mark there. Or another thing that you can do is you can just draw it like all the way through, like that. And then I like to take another color. Um, and I'll do my silt. Okay, so again, I'm going to use the silt, and it's 25, so it's going to be halfway between 20 and 30, and it's angled like that. Okay, I'm going to draw another angled line. Okay, it's not exactly on the line, but it'll be okay. And then let me find one more color. Okay, and then the last is 50% clay. And so the 50 you see is like horizontal, it's right here. So I'm just gonna go right here. And where these three mix, where those three lines meet, that's the type of soil you have. And so our soil, this soil sample was clay. Do you guys see how that worked? Because we're gonna do an example in a second, and I'm gonna let you guys try it. see that you're typing, so I'm just giving you a second. Oh, it went away. So I'm gonna start with the sand. The sand is down here. Huh, that's so weird. Okay, that's good. That's good to know. I wonder if they like expect students to be using it on their phones or they want them to use it on their, I don't know. That's good to know. Thank you. And then we have 25% clay. Do one more. 25% silt. Okay. Okay. I got sandy clay loam and it looks like that's what you guys got too. So that was good. Let's try one more. So I'm going to use this angled one right here. And then we've got 30% silt. So I'm going to use this right here. And then what do we have? We have 35 clay. Yep. Yep. Mine looks just like y'all's. Good job, guys. And so you might see these soil texture triangles on your test or on the AP exam or on a quiz. You might need it for your lab again when you have those percentages of your soil. And then you can kind of see, you can see what type of soil you have. Um, so the next thing I want to do is, we talked about the different types of soil and we talked about the size of the particles and things like that and which one was likely to kind of have too much water, which is what we call waterlogged. And so this is an actual practice question from and so basically this is actually from AP Classroom, and it's one of the new style questions where, they're having you look at a data table and, use the information in the data table and the knowledge of AP Environmental Science, and then, you know, basically interpret that data or um, be able to make intelligent um, decisions, from that data. So these are 4 different soil samples, and they're showing you the percent silt, sand, clay, and humus. And in this one, they're separating it out into humus too. So there's 4 different types instead of just the sand, silt, clay that we saw in the triangle. And they're asking you which one of these soils do you think would be the most likely to get waterlogged or have too much water, have standing water, after it rains, water gets stuck in that soil. So, yeah, what do you guys think? Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing some really good answers. So, basically, you're going to want to look for the soil sample that has the most clay. And that's because remember that clay is that tiniest particle and the that it's going to be more likely to hold water. And so this one has a lot of clay. And so that one is the one that's most likely to be waterlogged, just because it has the most clay. Um, and so that's how we'll do that one. Now let's go to another one. Now, ooh, I did not type nutrient very well. Um, Now, these are some things that we talk about when we talk about um, soil. And you may have seen this like on your plate tectonics FRQ last module, where it asks, what are some properties of soil and things like that. And again, that part, it's hard with these FRQs because, when you do the AP exam expects that you've already learned the whole course. So when we try and pull these FRQs for you, sometimes it's difficult to get an FRQ that fits exactly with the module we're studying right now. because, they expect you have, learned the whole course. And so these are some things that you may hear or that we may talk about that affect the quality of the soil, right? Um, and this is kind of like they use this term when they talk about like Earth. It's called like the Goldilocks hypothesis or whatever. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's just right. Um, like the distance Earth from the sun. But you can also use that Goldilocks hypothesis with basically like every quality of soil, right? Um, for example, water holding capacity. You don't want it to be all sand, because then all the water is going to flow through too quickly and the plant won't have time to absorb it. But you don't want it to be all clay because then it's just going to hold the water and the roots, can get waterlogged and root rot and all these different things because there's too much water. And so all of these you can kind of think of as the Goldilocks hypothesis. You want to be just right, kind of in the middle. Um, so that's, that's your water holding capacity, how much water it can hold. Your fertility is basically like the overall health of the soil, how well it grows things. The nutrient holding capacity is very similar to the water holding capacity, except it's talking about all the different nutrients instead of just water. The pH, same thing. A lot of you guys wrote that on your FRQ. Neutral is best usually. Um, when we talk about the texture, that's like the like we just did. We were determining the soil texture. Interestingly, if we go back. This loam is like the very best soil. Loamy soil is supposed to be the very best because it's got an equal mixture of, all three, which then improves, right, your nutrient holding capacity, your fertility, and your water holding capacity because the texture kind of determines all three of those things, right? Or helps determine. And then the salinity, typically, this is the only one that's not really like a Goldilocks. You want a low salinity. And I know we're kind of talking about salinity in that plate tectonics FRQ. You guys talked a little bit about salinity as well. And then in this module, we'll have a discussion about salinity because it is such a big problem. Um, and so these are kind of our six main qualities of soil that we kind of talk about. So now, whoa, this is a lot of text, right? This is an interesting question. It's a new style. One of the things that the College Board is really emphasizing with the new style AP exam is the scientific method. And with that comes independent variables, dependent variables, hypotheses, things like that. If you guys were in the A portion of the course, you know that we like really harped on you with those independent variables, dependent variables. What's your hypothesis? We're like always asking you that in all your lab reports and all that. And that's, one of the reasons is because, that's really important now on the new AP exam. So this one's interesting because he's kind of explaining this experiment that this environmental engineer is doing is basically what you're going to do in your soil lab that I was explaining to you earlier. Um, he measured like the flow time instead because he was looking at permeability, but it's the same type of thing. And this whole question is about soil, and so you're like, oh, they're going to ask me something about soil, right? But then when you get the question, it's really just what is the independent variable, right? And if you remember, the independent variable is the thing that you are manipulating or you are choosing, you are deciding. And then the dependent variable is the thing that you're trying to figure out. You're trying to measure the the thing you're looking for. Okay. So when we look at this question, um, and this one I thought was a little bit confusing. Um, what do you guys think would be the independent variable? That's a good one. That's a really good, in I teach physics too, and in physics, um, we always say the independent variable is always time. It's always time. Um, yeah, right? This is really hard, I thought. Um, the independent variable is actually A, and I'll tell you why. Um, so this is what I thought was difficult, is because it calls it the sample of material chosen, and I think they should have just said like the soil sample. Um, and so basically, each of these different soil samples, see, they're testing 4 different soil samples. That's the thing that they're testing. That's the thing that they're figuring out the difference between. And so that's going to be their independent variable. Okay, is that soil sample. And then let's go ahead and do the dependent while we're here, because I think it's important. And then the dependent is the thing that they're looking for. So usually we say it's the thing that you measure, right? But in this case, they had to measure something and then use those measurements to calculate what they really wanted, right? Um, so he wants to examine the permeability. That's the thing he really wants, he's looking for. And so the permeability is going to be his dependent. And so that's why I think this one's so tricky. Well, let me put a T here, but just know that that means a T. Um, is because he's measuring, right, the flow time. He's measuring the total volume of water he recovered. But he needs both of those numbers to get the permeability, and the permeability is really what he wants. Okay. And so the permeability is going to be his dependent variable, and then the soil sample is going to be his independent variable, which I think is I thought this one was really difficult, the way they worded it, at least. So I wanted to show it to you because it is difficult. And then the very last thing that I wanted to talk to you about was these different soil regions. And so these are all the different soils, and believe it or not, soil scientists classify soils in orders, just like we talk about orders for animals. We have orders for soils, and then we have suborders and all that kind of stuff. Um, and so I just want to talk about like a couple little like um, overarching things about these soils. Um, the arida soils, those are going to be your deserts typically. And the way I remember that is it says arid in there, and an arid climate is the climate you'll have in a desert. Um, these are going to be your rainforests. Okay, these are those like tropical environments. Um, and then, excuse me, if you've got a soil, that's like very, very cold, that's going to be kind of this. You're going to have a lot of permafrost, and you can see that one like really high, right? Um, that color's like way up there. Um, they don't even mention this ice one. I mean, that's not even really a soil, right? It's just ice. And the same with kind of this rocky land. If you want to talk about, excuse me, volcanic soils, that's going to be these. And these can be very rich. They can be. Okay. And then if you want to know, okay, like what is the best, right? What is the very best soil, the best one for growing? And that's going to be your that's typically these mollisoils. These are going to be typically the best for crops. And if you see, it's like that bright green, right? And what is like this area right here? Bright green, and that's where we grow most of our crops, right? The central United States. Um, that's where we have our grasslands, and those are grassland soils. That's what they are. And so those are the best crop. That's the best like crop growing soil. Okay. And then there's a couple others, but I'm not going to get into all those. I just want to give you a few. And I wanted to talk about the rainforest one because that comes up a lot in AP Environmental Science because people think that they can just cut down the rainforest and then they can grow stuff. But that's not really a long-term sustainable solution. What happens is, then it depletes the soil of nutrients, and they have to cut down more rainforest, which then depletes the soil of nutrients. And also, when you're cutting down that rainforest, it's going to increase erosion, which remember, what are the top two parts of that? Those top two parts that we want are the first ones to erode it, and those are the most important for growing. And so it's kind of one of those negative feedback loops where it takes you farther and farther away from what you want. And so that's kind of those different soils. So hopefully this was helpful